This is episode 6 of the Podcast Digest. Serial says, well, I want to thank you very much for coming back again this week. A brand new episode of the Podcast Digest for you right now. And before I get going this week on my show recommendations, my listener pro tip, I just want to reiterate something I've said a couple of times, but I really don't think I've emphasized it enough. I really can't thank each and every one of you for spending this 15-20 minutes with me each week. I love the fact that there's so many podcast fans out there. Yesterday was National Podcast Day. I listened as much as I humanly possibly could. I mentioned in my episode last week about how I like to share the shows that I'm listening to through my Pocket Cast application. I was doing that all day yesterday. So if you're not following me on Twitter at @poddigest, I'd like to do that frequently. I did it a couple of times today as well. Follow me. My name's Dan Lizette here on the Podcast Digest, and let's get into this week's episode, shall we? First, though, a couple of thank yous. In my first 5 episodes, I've reviewed a number of shows with a number of hosts. Several of those shows and several of the folks I've been interacting with on Twitter have mentioned me on their shows, and I want to thank them very much. It means a lot to me that you guys enjoy what I'm doing, and folks are thanking me for reviewing their show when the reality is it's their show that is the great content. I really want to draw the attention to these great podcasts out there that I hope some of my listeners aren't aware of or they haven't heard of yet, and go check them out. But how is this movie? I mentioned back in episode 3, along with That'll Play, both of those guys, Musings of the Geek podcast network, both of them on one of their recent episodes gave me a shout out and mentioned their review. Thank you guys. Dana at How Is This Movie? Check out his most recent episodes too. Pulp Fiction and Dirty Harry, 2 of my absolute favorites, and he is spot on with the quality content still coming out with his show. And That'll Play is just really taking off. They are really doing phenomenal work there. Check out those guys if you've not done so already. Also, a special mention for the iOS Docs show. I've not yet had an opportunity to review their show. Quite honestly, I need to kind of go back and listen to a little bit more and take some more in. I like to have some type of back catalog familiarity, if you will, before I review something. But those guys also mentioned Jerry from the show had sent in some feedback in a previous episode that I mentioned here, and they referenced that on one of their recent episodes as well. So the iOS Doc show, if you are a fan of iOS or Apple stuff, check them out. Also, iTunes reviews. I meant to mention this last week, and unfortunately, I just sort of slipped my mind. Pretty sad, I know. iTunes reviews are of the utmost importance to someone like me, somebody who's just getting off the ground, still single-digit episode numbers. So if you do like what I'm doing, an iTunes review would be so appreciated. And there was a particular user who left me a 5-star review. The username was OTNEMEM52. I'm not even sure how to pronounce that, so I'm not going to attempt to slaughter it. But this person says that they've been listening since the first episode, that it's a great show for people who love podcasting. They said that I have a great way of speaking and communicating my thoughts, and the love for the shows that I recommend really shine through. I really appreciate that. Thank you. That feels extraordinarily good to hear that somebody out there is following along, that likes what I have to say, and will listen to a new episode. So if you want to join in on this parade, I would be very appreciative. Go over to iTunes, leave me a quick review, or on Stitcher. Stitcher is another way that I see my listeners really coming to the show as well. But I'm also on TuneIn Radio. Player FM was just added this week. Anywhere you guys would like to check this out, of course, you can see all the shows and some additional blog posts I've been doing over on my website, thepodcastdigest.info. So many different sources, guys. There's a Facebook group. Of course, my Twitter account, which is sort of my home base for all of my announcements. Any way you can find me or the Podcast Digest is greatly appreciated. So I'm glad I got those thank yous out of the way, because I should have mentioned them last week, and I apologize, especially to those other shows who had recently mentioned me. Thank you guys all. So let's move on. Our first section, as always, is our listener pro tip section, and I've got what I hope will be a good pro tip this week. I've mentioned a number of things about applications and how you listen. For this one, I want to talk about a hardware recommendation, and specifically a Bluetooth headset recommendation. Just this week, I replaced a previous Bluetooth headset I was using, and I actually went through a couple of exchanges at Best Buy before I settled back into something I know well. My recommendation is the LG Tone Pro 750. If you are not familiar with this neckband style headset, I absolutely love it. For years, I had the original, the LG Tone 700, and I ran that original model into the ground, and it had phenomenal battery life. It was so discreet. You could wear it around your neck. It slipped under a collared shirt. Guys, if you have collared shirts you wear like I do, it is really a great option. Eventually, I killed that. The cord started to come out of the neckband, and it wasn't a fault of the product. I think I had it over 2 years, and I just literally wore it every day. So then I moved to the 730, which I liked it, but I found the battery life wasn't quite as good, and recently one of the buds on it went out, so I looked for a replacement. So I went to Best Buy and I tried the Motorola buds. Don't waste your time there, guys. If you are into Bluetooth headsets, the Motorola buds, I'm not sure if they're due for a refresh or what, but it was not a good experience. Exchanged it back, paid the extra money, and went for the upgraded back to my LG Tones, the Pro Model 750. Now, 800 and 900 are also on the markets. I'm sorry, they're a little out of my price point, especially with the investment I've been making here recently into my new podcast studio. It wasn't in the budget. So I went for the 750s, and I absolutely love them. They've been remodeled. The buttons are a lot more tactile feedback than the 700 or 730. It still fits nice. The battery life seems back more like the 700s. You've got a great steady connection with this, the Bluetooth. You can definitely get the 30 feet, they say, probably even a little bit more. One of the things I like about it is you can really easily wear just one earbud in. I wear them around the house a lot, and I've got, a wife and kids and dogs, and oftentimes there's other things going on I need to pay attention to as well. And so having one earbud in and kind of monitoring the goings on around me is a real benefit. And that's sort of how I wear them at the office as well. I do have my own office at the office. So if anyone comes to my door and needs my attention, or the phone rings or an instant message pops up, I'm able to kind of stay tuned into both environments, my podcast that's going on in one ear, as well as the the world around me and my professional day job as well. So I've used them at the gym. A lot of you, I'm sure, work out. I do on occasion, although not enough. But the LG Tone Pro 750s work great on the gym as well. You can lay on the couch with them. You can lay in bed with them. However you like to listen to music or podcasts, they are Bluetooth, so they don't have phenomenal music. I'm no audiophile. My primary entertainment that I consume on them is the podcast, and they are great for that. So that is my recommendation. Check out the LG Tone Pro 750 for all your Bluetooth, call taking, podcast listening, gym working out, office wearing needs. That's my pro tip for this week. Hope you like it. If you've got a headset, especially a Bluetooth one, or even a regular wired one that you use, that you want me to share with the listeners as a great option, let me know. Shoot me an email at thepodcastdigest@gmail.com. My name is Dan Lizette again. Or you can find me on Twitter, as I mentioned, at PodDigest, or on the Facebook group, or I'll comment on this blog post when the show goes live, thepodcastdigest.info. All those places. So let's get into our show recommendations, the reasons we are all here. What shows am I reviewing this week? Well, I mentioned in a blog post earlier today, if you saw that on Twitter, I think it was actually yesterday, I said that I was going to try something new this week, and I will let you know what that is with my second show recommendation. So stay tuned for that. But first, I'm really excited to tell you about the first show this week. This guy is so cool, and I am really excited to be recommending my first show this week, the S. Anthony Says podcast. Now, guys, I've listened to, as I mentioned before, I like to have at least a half a dozen episodes under my belt so that I can really feel as if I have some type of back catalog understanding for these folks. And I've listened to the 6 most recent episodes. They are episodes 125 through 130, and 130 just came out this afternoon, as a matter of fact. I knew I was going to be talking about his show today, so I made sure to listen to that right before I came on the air this evening. But check this guy out. The website is santhonysays.podbean.com. Let me spell that for you. The letter S, Anthony, like the name, says, says.podbean.com. His email is the santhonysayspodcast@gmail.com. This is sort of a one-man comedy show, an hour a week, told in almost sort of a journal or a commentary style format. I say it's kind of like a journal because sometimes you sort of get S. Anthony's inner dialogue on all kinds of different subjects, but it's also sort of that commentary style because he will literally tell you his thoughts on just about any subject he covers. He basically runs through a lot of personal experiences, but also gets topical with recent news, things in the headlines. The celebrity nude photo leaks were out there, the Ray Rice incident, and his take on it is literally so poignant, so dead on, makes you literally kind of pump your fist and be like, tell him. It is that kind of reaction you'll have if you listen to this show, which obviously I'm encouraging you guys to do. One word of caution, just to be, letting all of our listeners know, this is definitely an adult show. Content and language are present, but if you are an adult and you don't mind those type of things, this is a show you need to check out. It is he is I don't want to say aspiring because I know he's been on comedy tours already. I've been across his website and looked at his personal blog. He has had a degree of success in the entertainment industry. I believe he's approaching 7,000 followers on Twitter, and he is just the most personable guy. He has already interacted with me back and forth on Twitter. I've retweeted several of his show announcements, and he has just been absolutely accommodating to all of his listeners. So his shows are sort of presented in segments. He's got these 12 to 15 minute segments that comprise his hour show. And each one of them sort of are topical. They cover a topic, and he gets into some very deep subjects, as I mentioned, some of the things like the Ray Rice incident and some larger subjects like karma. But he also will cover a lot more lighthearted things. He recently talked about, I think on today's episode 130, a conversation with his parents who had accidentally stumbled across porn on the internet, or his recent interaction with a couple of guys at the martial arts studio that he does some light training at, and the whole scale, the whole gamut back and forth of sort of his experience. You can see that there are some definite set pieces, things that he has used on stage or maybe has planned to use on stage. I heard him mention in one of his episodes that this fall he'll be back out on tour, which is really entertaining to think that some of this material that we're hearing on this podcast could make its way to a stage one day. But he also will talk about things like music and movies and girlfriends and, well, his stories with his girlfriends. I don't want to spoil everything that you can hear on the S. Anthony Says podcast. You just have to subscribe and start working through his back catalog. He is something else. And I'll tell you what, I've said this before with a couple other shows that I've recommended. As a fellow solo podcaster, I'm always completely impressed with anyone who can sort of pull this off by themselves. My show is weekly, right around that 20-minute mark, 15 to 20 minutes. And that's great. And I'm comfortable with that level. And I hope that you are too. I try to want to get in and get out and hope that I'm delivering value quickly. My goal is not necessarily so much entertainment, although I hope you find this a little bit entertaining, but sort of to deliver information. S. Anthony, he's trying to entertain you. And in my opinion, he wildly succeeds. I love listening to his stories, his backstories, his commentary, and making it feel as if, dude, this guy's got it. It's clear that he's a good person with a good head on his shoulders. He's very appreciative of his listening audience, and it really shines through. He's constantly thanking his listeners. And so I really think it's a worthy investment. You'll get some great entertainment, and I really think he appreciates you being there. So that is my first show recommendation, S. Anthony Says Podcasts. Check them out, santhonysays.podbean.com, and follow him on Twitter at santhonysays or at santhonythomas. He has 2 Twitter accounts, one for the show, one for himself personally. Check that show out. So for my second show recommendation, here is where the twist is, guys. I'm going to recommend a show to you that hasn't aired. That's right, a show that hasn't even started yet. Well, you may be asking yourself, wait a minute, this is the Podcast Digest. This is where you review. You just talked about how you listen to back catalogs and make sure you're familiar with something. How could you be recommending a show that hasn't even aired yet? Well, I'll tell you why, because I can almost guarantee you this is going to be awesome. What is the show? Well, it is an NPR product. Many of you, I'm sure, are like me, a fan of NPR. This American Life is probably, if not the most popular podcast in the world, which I think it is, probably the most widely known. Well, they are having their first ever spin-off show starting Friday. Yes, that's the day after tomorrow, depending on when you're listening to this. Friday, October 3rd, will be the first 2 episodes of a brand new podcast called Serial. Serial, Serial. You can find more information at serialpodcast.org. And this is going to be hosted by Sarah Koenig. She's a regular This American Life contributor and also supported by many of the same editors and producers that work on This American Life. And they're going to be taking a seasons approach to their release. So this is season 1. And on Friday morning, 10 a.m., we're going to receive episodes 1 and 2. So what is the content going to be? Why is this so interesting? Why am I recommending it, even though I haven't heard a word of it yet? Well, that's not completely true. I guess you could say I have heard a word. They did do a 4-minute preview of the first episode. But based on that, why am I recommending it? Well, this is going to be sort of a true life story of a murder mystery. And Sarah Koenig did, according to the website and the preview that I've heard, over a year of interviews and research and digging and sort of going to find out the truth behind a 1999 murder of a high school student, a girl, that her ex-boyfriend was accused of and found guilty and sentenced to life back in 1999. Now, Sarah's done some digging and found that this may not be the whole story, that possibly the jury and the public hasn't gotten all the information. So over the course of season 1 and these multiple episodes, and it doesn't say for sure how many they're going to be revealing sort of the truth that they found. Think of, Dateline NBC or 60 Minutes, one of those true crime stories where the truth kind of comes out, makes you question the ultimate verdict that came about. But done, obviously, in a public radio format, or in this case, a podcast format, where each week you're going to be able to continually follow the ever unwrapping, evolving story of this particular murder case. One thing that's really interesting too is that on the website, serialpodcast.org, they talk about the website will be contributing towards the overall picture of the situation. So the website may have additional photos or images or maps or graphs or details or dialogue that they couldn't fit into the podcast itself. So between this serialized episodes of this first season, along with the information that's going to be put up on the website, it'll be like this ever growing, intricate story of something that actually happened, and not far from where I'm located here in Southeast Pennsylvania. So I think it's going to be extraordinarily interesting. If you've listened to This American Life, you know the production value, you know the quality, you know the storytelling ability. And to have it done in this type of format, I think is going to be absolutely exciting. The whole thing's modeled off sort of the old-time radio stories, causing you to want to tune in and week out. And I have a feeling this show is going to be one that not only have I already subscribed, you can do that now in iTunes. The 4-minute preview is out there right now. But you can also go to the website, one more time, serialpodcast.org, and subscribe through whatever means you like, and catch these first 2 episodes that are coming out Friday, October 3rd, 2014, if you're listening to this much, much later. And check out this show. I have a feeling this one's going to be a good one. So that is my second show recommendation this week. I want to, before I wrap up, I just want to apologize, guys. I mentioned on my blog earlier, I've been a little sick lately, and I've sort of been fighting back a cough this whole episode. Hopefully it doesn't come through too much. I'm on the mend, though, and looking better. So before I wrap this up, let me just once again thank you so much for taking the time to join me again here in the Podcast Digest. It really means a lot to me, guys. And if you could take a few minutes and leave that 5-star review in iTunes. Follow the show on Twitter at Pod Digest. Check us out on Facebook. Just search The Podcast Digest. And or check out the website, thepodcastdigest.info. I do occasionally throw in additional blog posts in there with kind of the progress of the week and where I am with any new news. So that'll do it for this week. Episode 6 is in the can. Hope you guys enjoyed. My name is Dan Lizette, and I will talk to you again next week.